We'll give it a few minutes while everyone else trickles in here. I know Luke's going to be joining us today to talk about sub 2 stuff. Might be a few minutes behind, but he's a coming.
Yeah, Luke and I, we just had coffee a few hours ago today.
Nice. This is a topic that I know nothing about, so it'll be an entertaining, I think it'll be entertaining, hopefully, for everybody. How's everyone's weeks going?
Going great.
I got a thumbs from Thomas.
I know for me, a lot of those days started to blur together, but I think, yeah, today is Thursday. I don't know, those last 2 days were kind of a blur.
Funny. Yeah. This whole week still feels like Monday. I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah. If it wasn't for my calendar, it's what do we have school today is often the question. Is it a school day or a remote learning day?
Right. So true.
That's funny.
It's challenging, to say the least.
And are your kiddos in school?
Today, yes, they're Thursday and Friday, and then every other week it's Wednesday. So I'm like, I have the calendar on the fridge and crossing off days.
Yeah. It was not last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before. And I had a whole panic moment, like, oh my gosh, did I forget to send them to school? And then, oh, nope, this is not their Wednesday on.
I gotta remember early out too. Like I'm gonna be like having that anxiety too. That's definitely something that really, like, I'm like at the clock.
Yes. We are late start on Wednesdays. So my high schooler doesn't start school until 10:30 on Wednesday.
Cool. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Well, it's cool for her.
I don't know about that. You might not be able to get them up.
I know. I'm like, I still go to work at a normal time, but she's driving now. So that's all better.
Oren, how is it overseas with that? Are schools back in by you? Oh, can't hear you, brother.
You asking me?
Yeah.
Good question. Actually, until today, school was already started. But since tomorrow, we are the first country in the world that's going to second quarantine.
Wow. Okay. That's
Yep.
No.
You're the first country in the world that is what?
That's going to a second quarantine.
Oh, no.
21 days. Yep. We suck.
Wow.
Wow. I think the U.S. is still working on their first.
And also tomorrow it's our New Year's Day.
Gotcha.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, there's that. Okay, I'm done complaining.
There's some perspective for you.
Totally.
Yeah. There's some perspective.
Yes.
Perfect. I see a Derek on here. I see Joe, Amanda, Grace. How's everyone doing?
Doing well.
Good. Thanks for asking.
Good here.
Good, Amanda. Awesome. Glad you guys could join us.
Thanks.
Got a Chris. Chris, you have a mic, brother? Nope. Okay. Well, I say let's get started. Sam, do you have a market update for us?
I do. I'm actually really excited to share. So I'll save the best part that I think is the best part for last. But first things first. So the total number of sales for the month of August, we had 1,674 total listings that sold, which is a little over 100 increase from this time last year. Our average days on the market to sell remained the same as last month, and we're still riding at 50 days, which is down 1 day from last year. Our total number of listings for the month of August, and these are active listings, is 5,211, which is a couple hundred decrease from this time last year where we had 5,800 total active listings. So shifting more into that seller's market compared to last year.
That inventory shrinkage is interesting. People are either staying put or there's a higher demand.
Well, based off of, here's like the most exciting part. So our average sales price is $259,931, which is a $9,000 increase from last month.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty significant. And at this time last year, our average sales price for, this is all residential, was $235,932.
That's incredible. So like you said, this is residential, and not only is it residential, but it's single family. So we're not pulling duplexes. We're not pulling any of that, correct, Sam?
Correct.
So all single family residential. So we're seeing a huge price increase. Obviously, I mean, we're seeing some higher end homes go. Do you know roughly what those, do you have any of those stats by chance, Sam?
I don't have it broken out by price point, but I will definitely do a search on that and have it in the Meetup group.
Nice.
Just to get a better idea.
Hey, Sam, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Those numbers, is that all of Des Moines Metro, or is that only your real estate agency?
Nope, this is the Des Moines Metro. So this is our entire MLS. So Des Moines proper, all of the suburbs, and a decent amount of the little bedroom communities that surround us. I would say 30-mile radius from the center of Des Moines.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good question, though.
Those stats, Humphrey, they'll pull in, if they're on market in Newton, it'll pull it, but that's kind of the overlap, where we start to overlap in some areas. So, yeah.
Okay,
Hey, Luke.
good deal. Thank you.
Howdy.
How's it going, brother?
It's going good. How are you?
Good. Nice timing.
Perfect. Right on time.
Does anyone else
I'm in my
have
bedroom, so.
about the market updates? Any other questions out there on that? If you guys have questions as we go through this throughout the evening, feel free to post them in comments. We've got someone watching comments both on the Zoom meeting as well as on the Facebook Live. For everyone watching on Facebook Live, there's 3 to 5 minute delay. So if you ask a question, we'll get to it. It'll just be kind of out of order. Zoom is more immediate on those questions. And just so everyone knows process-wise, it goes on the whiteboard to the left of me, and I try to work those in as we go through. So I'm excited. We've got Luke on the line today. Thanks for joining us, Luke.
Yeah, no problem. I'm in my bedroom, so I apologize. I tried to get the virtual background going, but it just didn't work. So.
Oh, you're good, brother. It's no problem. I got a big Larry TV screen behind me, so. Luke, you want to introduce yourself, brother?
Yeah, I'm Luke Shelton, born and raised in the area. 40 years old, wife, 2 kids, dogs, the whole thing. Yeah, so.
Right on. And what is it about real estate that you do?
So I buy and sell primarily with owner financing. That's probably 80% of what I do. I'll do a couple wholesales here and there, hotels, other things like that. I have some, I guess you'd call them apprentices, mentees that we kind of like teach them the ropes, and we JV on some deals and stuff like that. So
right on, brother. Right on. And tonight we're going to be talking kind of about subject to, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So you do what do you like subject to? Talk to me about that first. I know nothing about subject to, so I'm coming at you with some questions. They're from pure ignorance. So
yeah, so I initially got introduced into the world of subject to before anything else. So it wasn't like a transition from, one thing, a lot of people, they dive in with wholesaling and then they sort of like snowball into other things. For me, subject to was like this strategy was sort of like my entry into it. I met my mentor probably 8 years ago now, 7, 8 years ago. He was on, Bigger Pockets today. There was a sort of a precursor before Bigger Pockets was around. It was called flippinghomes.com.
nice.
It's kind of what Bigger Pockets is now. And there were all these wholesalers and rehabbers in there. And then there was this one guy who was basically telling them they were doing it all wrong, blah, blah, blah. I was like, who the hell is this guy? And he was doing like the boot camp circuit at the time, selling courses and whatnot. And so I
Do you mind sharing who that was, brother?
Yeah, his name's David Alexander. He's a very good friend of mine now. He's in Dallas.
Okay.
And so I reached out to him. I messaged him on this website, and he was a guru at the time. And then he called me, he's like, hey, what's your number? And he called me like 10 minutes later. I was like, wow, that's cool. And he talked me into his program, his subject to owner finance stuff, created real estate really. And I bought it, and sort of the rest is history. It took me a while to really, I guess, go all in and get going. But that was like my entry into the business, was doing those types of deals.
Gotcha. Do you still do subject to this day, or did you kind of?
yeah.
Okay, right on.
Yep. So I just closed one a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. What's your favorite strategy for acquisition?
Subject to.
Okay. Awesome. Fair enough. Go to what you know,
So
right?
that's what it is too. I mean, a lot of people, they sort of equate subject to with low equity deals, and that's not true. I just picked up a house over in Brook. It was the deal that I just spoke about in Brook Run, over it's in between Altoona and Pleasant Hill. It's like a newer development. I got it subject to for $220. It would retail. I'm going to owner finance it for $320. So
nice.
I mean, it's it's an acquisition strategy. It's just another thing to have in your toolkit of how to acquire properties without putting your name on loans.
That's awesome. So to subject to, it means to essentially acquire the property subject to the mortgage or any other liens that you negotiate in. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, it could be more often than not, it is the mortgage, but it's subject to some sort of encumbrance on the property. You could take it subject to a lien or
who's that?
Various different things.
Who? Dora. You're right. You gotta talk with
Dora the Explorer entered the room, everybody.
Hey, Dora. I'm not sure who's next open. That's okay. Anyway, if Dora wants to come back, just throw it in the comments. That'd be perfect. So you were talking about any encumbrance that could be out there, but primarily sub to.
Yeah, primarily it's going to be a mortgage. I mean, it could be, one thing a lot of people, and this is sort of, I go on tangents, so stop me if I get off track. But another thing is a lot of liens will expire after a certain amount of time. So you could take a property subject to a lien, and if you're going to hold it long term, that could be used as leverage on the acquisition side that that it's going to expire at some point down the road.
Do you know what the risks of that are?
So from what I know is they could foreclose. So say you took a house subject to some sort of credit card lien. If the lien holder, I suppose theoretically they could foreclose on the house because they do have a financial interest in it, but I doubt they would do that.
Sure.
They would have to basically take, from what I understand, they'd have to take the first current, or they would have to essentially take care of the first, pay the first off.
That makes sense. And just so everyone on the call knows, we're not attorneys. We're just talking. So get legal advice. If this is a strategy that you want to implement, guys, make sure that you seek independent counsel, you do all of that stuff. So everything that we're talking about tonight is just genuine conversation and not meant to be taken as legal advice. Unless you're an attorney. Luke. You're not an attorney, are you, brother?
No.
Okay. I'm always surprised when I ask that question. I should have asked it earlier. That's awesome. Darson asked a question. He says, can we start from ground zero? So do you put any money down? So walk us.
You know, nowadays you kind of have to, because everybody's got equity and everybody knows their house is worth a fortune. So back in the old days, you didn't really have to, but like, you know, this one over in Brook Run, I just did. I had to give the guy $10,000 to walk. I mean, he had so much equity that, you know, he was in financial distress, but you know, given the circle, he knew what today's market was, and he knew where we were in the foreclosure process. And so that was basically what it took to get him to walk.
Gotcha.
So who knows what the future holds, but you know, once it becomes a buyer's market again, I suppose that you probably won't have a lot of deals to where you'd have to bring money to the table.
Gotcha. So from square one, is the lead gen mechanism different for a subject to, or is it the same thing as?
For me, it's not. I mean, if you could theoretically target like low equity people, like expired listings and whatnot. But for me, I do the same thing that I've been doing for a while, which is pay-per-click marketing. I spend about $3,000 a month on it. I've expanded due to the costs of acquisition in our market. I've expanded it to other areas in Iowa. Sure. Basically every market with over 50,000 people, my pay-per-click hits now, just because it's so dang expensive here.
That makes sense.
So it brings the cost down. And believe it or not, people will give you the house subject to the existing mortgage over the phone with never meeting them. Happens all the time.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I can speak from our acquisition process. I mean, people tell us all the time what their mortgage balances are without us asking. They're like, oh, I owe 118 or oh, I owe 112.
Yeah.
I know what your house is approximately worth over the phone.
Right.
So yeah, totally get that. I can see the virtual subject to piece. So lead gen comes in, you take those phone calls and some mechanism, qualify them over the phone. Are you physically going out to these properties, or are you?
Yeah, if they're local, I do. So I think that's an important thing to touch on, is the positioning from the beginning. So I do things a little bit different. Like for me, I don't really care much about the beds, baths, and all that. I want to know circumstance, condition of the property, time frame. And then my fourth question is there a mortgage that I need to take care of when I buy the house? Not is there a mortgage I need to pay off, take care of when I buy it, not if I buy it. And usually they're going to tell me at that point, about 80% of the time, yeah, I owe 118 on it. And then my last sort of framing and positioning of my question is, I frame the question in a way to where they're not telling me the total price of what they want. They're only identifying the amount of walkaway they want in their pocket. So I'm getting them to separate that 118. So say they do want 130. I'm getting them to separate verbally and also in their mind that 118 from the 12,000 that they want cash in their pocket. So now we're only talking about that 12,000. And that leads me for when I actually do go into my next steps of my process to negotiate that walkaway, and then also integrate the subject to into that discussion.
That makes sense. And mentally for them, it's easier to reconcile with walking away from 12 down to 10 than it is going from 130 down to 120 something.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yep.
It's a great tip. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
So once you've done that, once you've qualified them, you said if it's local, you'll go out there and look at it. What does that conversation look like, and when do you interject the subject to component? Is it after you've looked at it, or is it are you running mainly virtual?
Yeah, so you know, afterward, I kind of the virtual side is sort of the same. The first portion is a phone call. The second portion is going to be in person, the appointment where I'm walking the house, discussing repairs, not necessarily pointing out things, but letting them know I know that this wall needs repainted, for instance. And then we basically sit down and we're starting to discuss now that walkaway money, right? And then for me, it's, you know, let me tell you, basically once we've negotiated my best price or their best price, So now I got them from the 12 down to the 8. It's like, let me tell you how I can probably get you that 8,000. And then I go into my whole scripting. There's 2 ways I buy houses. The first is with all cash. This doesn't make sense because it's tying up our capital at a lower rate of return than we get on those other houses. The second way I buy houses is I set up the takeover payments. What that means is I can get you to 12,000 cash at closing, but we're going to do it this way, X, Y, Z.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the main objections that they throw out at that point?
What if I don't pay?
Okay.
And I'm honest with them. I'm like, listen, if I don't pay, your credit's toast. But I'm going to sell this house to a end buyer who's going to pay me every month, and I'm going to make your payments. If I was collecting payments and not making your payments, that would be fraud. I'd be in jail. So I sort of overcome those objections that way.
I get you.
I create this big monster, which is me going to jail if I don't do it.
Interesting.
And I'm not in jail, so.
That's good. We don't want to be in jail. That's a bad place to be. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
That's usually the main thing. The second thing you're going to get is, it doesn't matter what sort of financial situation they're currently in, they can always project themselves as buying a house at some point in the future. And that's going to be another objection. And I always like to talk about things like that in regards to those objections in terms of what's happened in the past. And for me, what's happened in the past is and this has happened several times with me, the person who sold me the house subject to 3 years down the road, they want to go get a loan. That lender will call me and say, hey, what's going on here? I'll say, look, this is what happened. I'm now, I'll send them the HUD or, the Alto, whatever it's called now. And I'll say, I'm making those payments. I'm the literal owner of the house. I'm making the payments. Here's 12 months payment history. And in all instances, they've been able to buy a house.
Gotcha.
So I tell them I can't guarantee this is what's going to happen, but here's how it's played out for me in the past.
Sure. So it's not affecting their DTI as much, or debt to income ratio as much.
No, I think they kind of look at it almost like a rental. Like they only count a portion of that payment against their DTI.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, that's good information. So we've got, what if you don't pay? What if I want to buy a house? What else? What other big objections do they throw at you?
Those are really the only ones that you're going to get. I've had the due on sale brought up. If a seller brings up the due on sale clause, just the very fact that they know that even exists, you're not going to buy that house sub to.
Gotcha.
I've had one person do it, and I don't know how they knew about it, but I didn't buy that house. It ended up going to foreclosure. So
interesting. So in a lot of ways, you're able to take all those payments over, get an end user in there because you've got a sophisticated buyers list or a sophisticated rental list. So get an end payer in there, we'll call it, and really keep it out of foreclosure. Do you negotiate those sub twos at all? Do short sales or anything like that?
I don't.
Okay. Mm-mm. And what's the interest rate that you're typically seeing on those sub twos?
3.5 to 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one that's about, I think, 5.25 right now. That's the highest one that I've done.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're really underwriting both the loan and the interest rate as well as the acquisition. So there's 2 pieces of that underwriting process then.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Is there, Derek made a comment, he said that 2 months of rent proven will lower I'm assuming the DTI component down 75%. Is that right, Derek? Right on. Cool. And then Jose asked, why would a seller decide to agree to a subject to as opposed to just selling the house? What incentive does the seller have in that?
It's really the same motivation that they'd sell it to us for 50 cents on a dollar cash. I mean, we're just dealing with, they're not the normal person out there. They have some sort of life situation that falls into the death, divorce, foreclosure, relocation, that they have to sell the house. They're not, your everyday seller.
Gotcha. So in their minds, it's either I foreclose now, potentially, or maybe Luke makes my payments for me, and if he doesn't, I get it back, he goes to jail, and I foreclose it. So either way, they've got at least a temporary reprieve mentally, that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I mean there are houses I bought where there was no apparent motivation. Like one of my apprentices in the Kansas City area just bought one where the guy we wanted to move to Omaha and just didn't want to deal with listing it. We bought it for 150 sub 2. We sold it for 220. Got 20 down.
Nice.
So he had equity. He didn't really have what we would consider motivation other than just want to move, don't want to deal with a real estate agent.
Nice. So you're, just so I'm understanding that clear, you're seller financing on the back end as well. So you're using a subject to acquire, then you're doing a wraparound seller finance to disposition. Interesting. Okay. Huh. That's creative. So very little money out of pocket. You make a nice arbitrage, I assume, on the spread, as well as the equitable difference.
Right.
Cool. Okay. That's neat.
And there's various different things. Back when I first got started, I used to put a stepped interest rate increase every year or two, just to encourage a refinance. But at this point, I don't really even care if they do or not, so I don't do it anymore.
That makes sense. Do you factor your seller financing at all? So do you leverage any of that spread?
Say again?
So your seller financing, say you bought a house for 100,000 subject to, you sold it for 200,000. Are you putting any mechanism in between to re-grab some of that equity, that $100,000 equity? Okay. Interesting.
No, but like my post earlier that I posted about the return on equity, at some point you're going to have way too much equity. So I suppose moving forward, I don't know. I stopped doing the stepped increases, and it was sort of to alleviate a little bit of that.
Sure.
Somewhat. So.
And
also it basically makes it so I'll carry it long term, but I'm going to make a better, I'm going to make more on my spread, or they'll refinance so everybody wins.
Sure. So. And then one more question on the seller finance. Are you matching amortization then against the mortgage that you assumed?
No. So usually I'm going to sell, if it's like 150 and below, I'm going to sell at around an 8% rate.
Okay.
So it amortizes slower than my underlying will.
Got it. Okay. So they're paying off slower than you're paying off the existing mortgage.
Yeah. So my equity spread actually increases every month because of the pay down on the underlying. The interest rates are so low now.
Very cool. Yeah. How does it work on the first? Have you ever had any balloon payments come due on the mortgages or on the seller finance piece?
No.
Okay. So you stay away from balloon payments? That makes sense.
I mean, in my opinion, that's just, I don't want these houses back, and I don't want to set somebody up. I mean, because to a normal person, a $10,000 down payment or 15, that's like their life savings. Right. I don't want to put a balloon out in 5 years and have them not be able to refinance and then screw them over. I want them in the house long term, and so I'm not in the business to, just adds more complexity to my life. I don't want to deal with it.
That makes perfect sense. I get that, brother. And then what's the insurance change process look like? Does it trigger anything? Is that a red flag for mortgagers?
It can be if you don't do it right. So the seller always has to be listed on a policy as an insured. So I used to let my buyers set up their own policy and basically tell them this is how it needed to look. But for some reason, a year down the road, my buyers would go and get a new insurance policy, and I'd get this freaking thing in the mail, and I'm like, it's fine if you only have a few of them, but when you have like 30 or 40 of them and you're getting these every few months, it's like, I just take control of it now. And so I put a normal like dwelling policy on the properties with my company as a named insured, the seller is an additional insured, and then the bank's listed as a mortgagee.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you'll send that declaration page. Once that's all in place, you'll send that to the bank, and then the bank you'll notice an outgoing payment from the escrow account to the insurance company.
Gotcha. So the bank's still making the insurance payments once you make that update happen. Interesting. Okay. That's cool. So you're leveraging the escrow component both for taxes as well as insurance, I assume?
Yeah.
Nice.
In most cases.
Simplifies it. Do you use a servicer for your collections on the seller finance side?
No.
Okay. I get nothing for this, but we just recently transitioned to Blue Mountain Escrow out of Texas. I think they're down in Dallas. Something that Blue Mountain Escrow. So they do servicing. So anyone that's using contracts or doing seller financing, it's a great way to go, simplifying our life substantially. They'll do all the escrow build out for your contract pieces as well as remittance. They do collections and that kind of stuff. So it's made.
Yeah, eventually I want to sit on the beach all day.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we had gone down the route of I got MLOs. I got my mortgage originator stuff to go down that compliance route, and then we looked at the servicing route and all of that, and I was like, gee, golly, there's a whole lot of steps here. So we just found out sources for all of it. So I'm educated in it, but not educated to practically apply it.
Right.
So yeah, a couple more questions came in. So AJ asked, do you typically flip these, or are you keeping them as rentals? Expanding on that, it sounds like you're doing a lot of seller financing.
Yep, seller finance, almost all of them. Every once in a while, I will retail one out if there's enough equity, and depending on what my cash position is in my business, but more often than not, seller finance.
And that makes sense. So you grab them when you're really looking for that long-term interest offset. You're not looking for the quick dollars and cents.
Right. And once you start doing these, you're eventually going to have 5 to 10 that cash out every year. And so those are nice, the cash pops, and they're taxed at a different rate at that point than they are. It's long-term capital gains after a year. So
that's really cool. Yeah. Can you depreciate these like you would a typical rental, or?
No.
Okay. Because they're contract based.
Right.
That makes sense.
I think it's IRS form, I want to say 6252 or 5262, one of the two. It's a super complicated formula that they use that only accountants understand.
Yeah. That's the opposite of my skill set. It's not the accountant's not telling me, I have no idea. That's and Grace asked, just to clarify, there's no balloon payments to the sellers then, correct?
To the seller, no. I mean, you could. You theoretically could. I know people who say there's $100,000 in equity and they're like, I want $40,000, but you don't want to give them $40,000. You can put a second on it that's due only when your buyer refinances. No payments, no interest, nothing until they refinance.
Gotcha.
But that's going down a whole different road.
That's interesting. So I think what and Grace, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what she's asking is you don't pay off those mortgages early for these sellers. So there's no balloon on your payoff for those. Is there?
No. I'm sorry.
Has there been any incentive, or do you see any value in going down that route?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, 10-4. Yeah, I'm totally ignorant when it comes to the seller mentality around this. So these are questions that I don't know the answer to, just so we're clear.
Yeah, because the idea is to increase as much cash flow as you can while limiting your personal risk, and
that makes sense. Yeah, I like the concept of the model. My fear and my guard still goes up when we take over consumer debt and pass it along. Have you had any objections from the buyers of these, or do they even ask the question?
Of the underlying loan?
Yeah. So when you go to resell this, have your buyers, when you resell it, ever had any pause for the underlying loan?
No, I don't tell them.
Gotcha.
Like, I don't disclose any of that stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. And then we had another question. Do you take title of the property immediately? So what's that mechanism look like?
So yeah, when we're buying sub 2, at closing between me and the seller, title goes into my company name. There is a power of attorney from seller to me. That is the limited power attorney that only applies to the mortgage and escrow funds, insurance, things like that.
Okay. And
those are really, I think, the only documents other than your standard closing documents. I know there's some gurus out there that teach all about all these, they have like 500 different disclosure statements they have everybody sign, and I don't think they would hold up in court if you ever got sued, to be honest with you, but.
Sure. Yeah. So the mitigation there is just, hey, let's not go to court.
Yeah, pretty much.
Let's solve the issue. If we need to pay it off, we pay it off. If we need to do something
Right.
else, we do something else to stay out.
Yeah, I mean, if and that's where like being able, if you have just a low equity model doing this, if you ever did run into a problem down the road, theoretically you could have problems, because now how are you going to get rid of that underlying debt? You can't sell a note because you probably don't have enough equity to do it, because most people don't buy notes at 100%.
Nope. We're at 87.
Right. And so, yeah.
That makes sense. So dispo on the contract piece gets difficult only if there's an equity shrinkage, which that's the same no matter what. You essentially become a distressed seller yourself with 2 levels of complication on there.
Right.
That makes sense. What's the forfeiture process look like? Have you had to forfeit anyone when you've resold these?
Yep. So if you get a low down payment, you will get a house back. I promise you that. So that's the main thing is basically you have to serve them. Chuck has to serve them somehow, however he does it. He serves them. And then after they're served the notice, I think it's 30 days after that.
Okay.
Is when it's officially forfeited, and then you evict.
Gotcha. So nothing special, just because, so the acquisition model doesn't change how we would handle a forfeiture or a default when we sell it.
Correct.
Cool. That's good information.
I had a guy who dodged the sheriff for about a month and a half from getting served.
Yeah, they tend to do that sometimes.
Yeah, he answered the door and he said, "No, I'm not, I'm not Jim, whatever his name was,
Gotta love folks. Grace asked, do you list these on the MLS or do you FISBO them when you go to resell?
So I resell mostly on Facebook Marketplace.
Okay.
If you've put a house up in the 175 and below, owner finance, must sell, no banks, you'll get 100 messages within an hour.
Interesting.
If you're going to do that, here's a little advice. Have a pre-typed out 2-paragraph blurb that says the address of the house and tells them all to drive to the house and call the number on the front, on the sign in the front yard. Send it to everybody who responds to you, who messages you, regardless of what their question is, or regardless of how pissed they are that you're making them do that.
Fair enough.
Because the few that are going to actually follow your instructions are they're going to be your good buyers. Everybody else is just time wasters.
Gotcha. So a lot of tire kickers through Facebook Marketplace, but that's pretty typical no matter what your dispo model is. What does it look like for when you dispo these? You said get a good down payment. What does that mean? What's a good down payment in your mind?
I would say if you're under 100,000, I would say 10%. I don't give percentages to my buyers, but I'd say if you're at 10%, you're probably pretty safe.
Okay.
Regardless of the price point. How I do it is I sort of just like I explain it to my buyers is it's kind of like a bidding process. It's like, well, here, I don't really have any set down payment I require. What's the most you had to put down on the house?
Gotcha.
And you let them basically give you the offer.
Right. Okay. Cool. AJ asked, what risks do you work hardest to mitigate? So I'm guessing that was in response to staying out of court. So what, in your mind, what's the biggest risk factor for you?
Just doing what you say you're going to do. In the instances I've had to take houses back, I continue to make the payments.
Gotcha.
I'll bankrupt myself before I bankrupt the seller who I've taken their house over some to. And that's the God's truth.
That's good business. If they never have an interruption or a late notice, I'm guessing they don't care too much.
No, it improves our credit because they had a 500 when they met me, and now I've made 4 years of on-time payments on their mortgage. So
interesting.
Good. Yeah,
makes a ton of sense. And then Grace asked, what's the length of the process? How long does it take to get from conversation to close? And then is it complicated at all by the seller finance component, or is it faster?
What was that second part? Is it complicated by the seller financing?
Yeah. So is it complicated? Does the subject to component speed it up or slow it down?
It doesn't do anything. It's just however fast you can close on a property, depending on what attorney you're dealing with, I guess, who can get the title opinions back in a reasonable time.
We're not calling Chuck out for anything.
Hey, I'd say it if he was here.
Yeah, no, he said it for himself when he was on, I don't know if it was last month or the month before. He told us directly he's slow right now. Or he's busy making him slow.
Yeah. Busy competing with me on houses he's buying.
Yeah.
But it does. I mean, it doesn't add really any time to it. It takes a few weeks anyway to get from beginning to the end of any sort of transaction. And so in those 3 weeks, you can send the third-party authorization to the bank and confirm all the numbers and all that stuff. So what I'm finding out now is when you have a house, when you're owner financing a house in a price range of the one I have in Brook Run in the over 300 range, it's not quite as quick as like 180 and below.
From the dispo side?
From a dispo side, yeah.
Gotcha. Is it just limited buyer pool? Is that what you're?
Yeah, limited buyer pool. I've only done the Facebook Marketplace with that one. I do a whole Bandit sign method as well. I haven't had to do it recently, but on this one, I'm probably going to have to.
Gotcha. And when you say Bandit sign method, so you're talking dispo, putting them on the corners, saying house for sale that way. Is that?
Yep. So the way I do it is have a Bandit sign, owner finance, no bags, must sell, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, some unique feature like this one would be like school district or something. Then it has a phone number. That number dead ends to a voicemail. That voicemail gives the address, tells all the great things about the house, instructs them to go to the house and call the number on the sign in the front yard. They call me. I have a lockbox on the door. I make them walk through, and then we sort of like loosely negotiate over the phone just so I know if they have money or not. If they do, then we sit down at like a Starbucks or something and hash out the details.
Gotcha. So you let them look at the house before you qualify. Is that?
Yeah.
Nice. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. That saves a lot of time from the run through the rigmarole of things and see if they like it, then figure out if they're interested. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
Yep.
Thomas asked, does the seller keep the tax credit on existing mortgage? So you take it over, is that escrow yours or is it theirs?
It's mine. Yep. So you pass that on to your buyer too. So I have a software called Money Lender Pro that's kind of a servicing software. And so I deduct that credit and then I give that credit to my buyer as well on their side.
Okay. And that's the escrowed balance. So that's not, is that the prorated to date of close?
It's just in their balance. Yeah. So that money stays there post closing.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. And then Derek mentioned as a tidbit of advice, he said, try loan officers that turn down high income 1099 earners for that level of house.
It's a good idea. Thank you.
Well, that is fresh. That's a great tip, Derek. Thank you. There's a couple of folks that were talking about that inside of the agent Facebook group.
Yeah.
Central Iowa Realty Agent Group. They have a few folks in there, so it might be something to take a look at.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate that.
So we talked briefly about the paperwork. You said it's just a power of attorney, standard closing process outside of that. So power of attorney, do you do any special disclosures for the sub-2 or is it just special warranty deed?
Just a warranty deed. I might start adding a hold harmless agreement. But that would probably be all that I would add.
What prompted that? What prompts that change?
For me personally, I've had 1 or 2 people a year down the road, and it's better now because when I first started, my whole pitch to them was like, let's just say I implied that in 2 years it would be taken care of. When I didn't really say that, but that's what they heard, right? And so right at 2 years, boom, if you tell them 2 years, the day of 2 years from now, they're going to call you if it's still out there. And so I've had that. I've had a couple people sort of like freak out on me about that. This was in the past.
Sure.
And my mentor now, he's in Dallas, and he says he's having some issues with people, a couple years down the road and sort of freaking out about it. So
makes sense. So the long term, they get a little. So they're running into a pain point, or they're tired of that hanging in the back of their head long term, potentially.
Yeah, because what will happen is now 3 years down the road, they go to a bank The bank pulls their credit. They have this loan that they've completely forgotten about. Now that loan officer just says you can't do it because of debt to income, right? And so then they'll call me freaking out, oh, you mother effer, blah, blah, blah. And so in those cases, I'm just like, just let me talk to let me talk to them. So yeah.
Gotcha. And you usually you mentioned earlier, you can usually overcome that, like providing the payment history and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So on the front end, that whole harmless resets expectation. So we get away from any implied payoff or anything like that.
Right.
Set the expectation. Hey, we're going to take this out to full term until someone.
Exactly. And that's what I tell them now. I'm like, don't ever expect this to be paid off. But the hold harmless is just, it's going to be there to like have them actually sign something acknowledging, because they're people are people, right?
Yep.
They don't hear any of that stuff.
Yeah, we do the same thing in our PA. So it's we intend to profit in there. We're going to make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. As initial here, I just want you to know that we plan on making money on this. Set that expectation on the front end, and it really diminishes a lot of that long-term issue. Grace asked, what's your team structure look like? Do you have a VA, acquisition manager, or
just me?
Nice.
I recently hired a VA. He's great. I've hired VAs in the past, but I failed them. They didn't fail me. And the reason being is with a VA, especially Filipino VAs, you have to have like very clearly defined tasks for them to do. And if you don't, like before, I would just be like, well, here's what we're trying to do. Help me out. And I was just like, at the end of the day, I'd be like, did you do anything? No. That was my fault because I didn't like have like a clearly defined process of stuff for them to do. So now I have a VA that we're building out systems like step by step. We're working together every step of the way to build out systems on the acquisition side and then the disposition side. And then eventually the goal is to get myself out of the acquisition portion and then slowly remove myself from the day-to-day.
Interesting. From the national side, do you know any guys? Is this largely a one-man operator, or are there teams that are running subject to with acquisitions?
Yeah, there's a couple. I guess you would call them gurus, but I mean they're really doing a lot of transactions. My mentor personally, he's moved to more of like a coaching model to where he JVs with all his students. So he's not doing a whole lot of the day-to-day acquisition stuff. He's teaching them to do it. My friend Brad in Nashville, he's another good friend of mine, mentor. I mean, he does, I don't know, 50 to 100 deals a year.
Nice.
And he's, most of them are subject to on the acquisition side. And so he's got a whole team. So, I mean, it can be done for sure.
Gotcha. That makes sense. We had another question. What's the first step for someone to get started in subject to? Where do they go for information, or is there a book? What would you recommend?
Oh, there's probably a couple good people. I mean, if you reach out and just look up David Alexander on YouTube and Facebook, I'm not sure how much stuff he has out there in the public domain, but he's a great resource. There's a couple sort of like public figures. William Tingle's another guy. Ask me any questions you want. I'll answer anything. But really, I think the first step is just mindset. Know it. People will give you their house and leave their mortgage in place. That happens all the time. It's nothing special. I'm not this great negotiator and anything. It's just really about marketing to find these people, and then just find a good script or a good process on how to talk to them and how to get across what you're trying to do without using too much technical lingo.
That makes sense. So really get the mindset right, understand the basics of a sales pitch, and avoid sales pitching as much as possible, or coming off of sales pitching, right?
Just leave it as simple as you can. Don't mention words like subject to the existing mortgage, blah, blah, blah. Hey, how would it be if I just, came in and took over the mortgage payments? That's it. Shut up. Just let them digest what you just said, and then they're going to say something, and then just respond to whatever they say.
That makes sense. Yeah. Grace asked if you mentioned JVing with your mentors. Are you mentoring sub 2, or are you just teaching, or is that something that you're looking?
Yeah. I have an apprentice program. I don't know if this is the place to pitch it, but
sure.
So we're basically, I have a program to where I teach you everything there is to know about the basics of real estate all the way through acquisitions and dispositions. And it's a JV model. There's no costs,
Nice.
anything like that. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then Grace asked, what's the success rate for sub 2 pitches? Is it a one trick outcome, or are you actually throwing the cash with it?
I buy houses for cash too. I buy houses seller financed, the whole thing. I have the resources now to do that. Back in when I first got started, it was only sub 2. It was actually sub 3. This will blow people's minds. That's my friend David Alexander. He invented this whole sub 3 thing. He coined the phrase. And essentially what it is, I don't know how far you want me to get into the weeds. This was back in 2010 when he created this, when Dodd-Frank was like a huge boogeyman that was going to kill everybody. Basically what he is he gets an agreement with the seller, sub 2, I'm going to buy your house sub 2, right? And then he negotiates, but what I'm going to do is I'm first going to go find my buyer. I'm going to find my buyer before I do anything. Then he markets it owner finance, and he finds his owner finance buyer. He locks up a purchase agreement with his owner finance buyer. At closing, seller sells to buyer, and so the documents flow from the seller to the buyer, and then there's lines in your purchase agreement that basically funnel all the profit and the note to you. So seller sells the buyer, and then there's an assignment of the contract to theoretically me.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it avoids Dodd-Frank because I'm not, I'm just a note holder in that whole thing. I didn't sell or finance anything. I just bought a note.
Interesting. That's interesting.
And so it's a little harder to do nowadays.
Yeah, that the sales pitch on that's a little more difficult, I feel like.
Yeah.
And you've got some educated sellers and some educated buyers, and either side can really blow that up, I think. Interesting. That's an interesting concept, though. It's a good tool to have in the belt, if you will.
When the foreclosures hit the roof again, I mean, it'll be more doable. But now everybody knows their house is a gold mine. Everybody knows they have a ton of equity. They're like, no, I just want the money.
Yep. Are you finding a lot of mortgages that are behind right now? And if
yeah, the people who I'm marketing to, they're usually one to 4 payments behind at any given point. They're like it's this weird hamster wheel that they're on. It's like they just made like May's payment, and it's like always like that. They'll catch it up 2 months, then they'll have a brand new Corvette in their garage, right? But they're 4 months behind and they're just drowning in debt.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I assume you have to catch those up then when you take over.
Yeah. Okay,
that makes sense. And then you're paying the mortgage directly, correct? You're not paying the seller anything monthly.
No.
So seller forgets it exists entirely. They're not getting checks in the mail.
They're just walking away. None of the hassles there. It's really weird too. Is the majority of houses I buy subject to they don't pay online. So I'll go and I'll create an account for them and I'll just make those payments online.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And what happens, so if a payment gets missed, not for lack of trying, but say it just gets lost in the mail or anything like that, where does that notice go? Is it going to you or is it going to them?
So if I miss a payment?
Yep.
It would go to me because I change all the addresses.
Okay.
Yeah. So the power of attorney gives me all the legal authority to do all that.
Gotcha. Okay. So you get that notice, you know about it. Say you sent the check, it didn't get credited to the right account, you're going to get a late fee or a late notice in the mail that says, hey, dude, pay the mortgage. Then you can troubleshoot from there and solve it. So it's not like you're going to go 6 months into there without knowing about it at least.
Right.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, and you have to have a good system in place to track, because once you have a lot of these, they can be, it's a whirlwind. And that's a whole different subject to overcome. Is you see your bank account like go, whoosh, and then 3 days later,
yeah,
because you have all these checks that just came in or payments from your buyers, and so it's that's a whole just I guess an operation standpoint of how to deal with things.
That makes sense. That's why we moved out of the property management. That's not the reason. We moved out of property management, and that was one of the big benefits with stabilized bank accounts, right? So we don't have all the income coming in, nor all the mortgages going out, which is kind of a nice feeling.
Right.
And then with the contract servicing going into place, that's helping offset a lot of the mental overhead.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, and just so everyone's aware, contract servicing is a hell of a lot cheaper than it is for property management. You're not talking 10%. You're talking like $12. So,
Yeah, it's way cheaper.
yeah, for sure. A couple other questions. Grace asked, do you look for anything in the wording of the mortgage or a red flag?
I don't. You don't want arms. Well, let me rephrase that. You don't want arms like they used to do. Now you'll have an arm every once in a while. You'll see them like where it can adjust every 3 years or something like that. Maybe it can adjust one time. Back in the Wild West days of mortgage lending, when it was adjusting like every month, like you definitely don't want that. I've heard USDA loans are a little more risky to take subject to. I'm not sure why. I've taken a couple of them. I was newer and didn't really I probably didn't know there was even a risk to doing it, but something to do with the USDA loan makes it a little more risky of being called. It didn't happen to me. So
Sure.
Those are the only couple things I could think of.
Okay. And then what about VA loans? I know the first line on the top of the VA mortgage says this is not a suitable contact lender, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we're not assuming it. So, but yeah, I have VA loans in my portfolio.
Okay. Is any risk that you're aware of inside of that?
Not any more than, your normal due on sale clause risk.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Shannon asked, how do they reach out to JB if they have potential deals?
Just message me on Facebook. Friend me and message me. Yeah.
Makes sense. And then Dave asked, any weird experiences with the process? What's the weirdest thing you came across?
Well, I'll tell you a story, and this has to do with the due on sale clause. I got cocky here about 4 to 5 months. No, this is probably about 6 months ago now. I took a house subject to, and I bought a house from a lady who her dad he passed away. Right before he passed away, the loan was in his name, right? Right before he passed away, he deeded her the house. She fell behind. She reached out via my website. This was in Kansas City. I bought the house subject to, brought it current. There's like 10,000 behind. A few weeks later, I called the bank. For some reason, I still don't know why I did this. And I told them, listen, here's what happened. I own the house, right? I caught up these payments, so I can't remember why I was doing this. Probably just to convince myself that I could and that it wouldn't get called, right? And she's like, well, you're not supposed to do that. I was like, well, I know, but I did. So I own the house, so here's what it is. And she's like, well, that was illegal. I was like, okay. And we got off the phone. I go about my life. About a month later, I got an acceleration notice in my email. They were calling the loan, right? The thing everybody freaks out about. So I get it and I called them back, and I was like, the first person you talk to is a entry-level customer service person. And so I was like, you guys aren't really going to call this loan and foreclose. And they're like, oh yeah, we are, it violated the law. And I was like, no, you're not. I was like, let me talk to your supervisor. Long story short, I talked to the supervisor. Jamie's his name, SunTrust Bank or SunWest Bank. Super nice guy. I told him what happened, what I did. He's like, no, I'll take care of it. He's like, they're never gonna, he's like, I have a lot of pull around here. I'll go throw my weight around. Never heard back from him. So
that's so they might be in foreclosure. You just don't know it yet, or it could be totally taken care of.
We're good. We're good on it.
Nice.
They
Okay.
ended up resending the acceleration.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
Don't do that. I kind of, for some reason, I got cocky and convinced myself that it was a good idea. So
sure. Have you had the initial sellers ever come back and say, hey, we want the house back, we're still selling the mortgage, or anything crazy like that?
No, recently I did have one try to buy it back from me.
Okay.
But she didn't want to pay me what I wanted. So
interesting. Okay. And then anything weird left behind? What's the weirdest thing you've got so far?
I don't know. I just got a treadmill. and a ladder. I just sold those, but it has been the weirdest. Not a whole lot of not weird stuff. Most of the time, like I'll just have somebody come and haul it out. You know, all the junk that's left behind. I don't even really see it.
Sure.
Far.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Amanda asked, she says, sorry if this has already been covered and I missed it. Have you ever had a loan called? So kind of. Any other loan calls?
No, you know, I'm in a mastermind group. And between us, I would say there's probably over 4,000 to 5,000 sub-2 transactions that have been done, and there have been 4 called.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't even think out of those 4, I if I remember correctly, only one was actually like called. You'll have sometimes they'll threaten to do it, but most times they won't.
Gotcha.
So I think only one actually went through the entire process, because what the recourse is, they're going to foreclose on it, and it was a small local bank.
Okay. And the remedy to that, right, is you pay off the loan and you're good. That's really the remedy there. Okay. Have you had your VA ones for a while? What was it you?
Yeah, I've had one of them for, I think my second deal I ever did was a VA loan. I've had that one for almost 5 years.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Derek mentioned that you can get a policy through equity assurance that covers the cost of a due on sale that's triggered. He believes the cost is about 1%.
1%?
Yeah.
For what?
Purchase price. Yeah. Derek, is that purchase price or loan value, brother? Do you know?
So it's almost like a title policy, but just for the mortgage. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I believe it was purchase price.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if I do that. If you're doing any sort of volume, that would add up for a risk that is really non-existent.
No, I think it exists for houses that have like a jaded spouse that's walking down the driveway as you're signing the paperwork, you know, where you're kind of like not sleeping well at night because you know something might go down a little while later. So I wouldn't say it's for all of them.
Yeah, I suppose so. That hasn't been my experience, but.
Interesting. Thomas mentioned that he picked up 250 scale model semis in the house once. Nice. We just bought a house. The guys were cleaning out, and there was boxes upon boxes of commercial door closers. That's all. That and pee bottles and apple juice. Not sure, but those were the 3 things in there. So awesome. So we covered insuring the subject to deal. Just get it updated, make sure everyone's noted on there. We covered the due on sale clause. We've talked about a lot of the exit strategies that you use. How do you explain it to? Do you use these in your portfolio to borrow money?
I don't. Okay. I know you can leverage them. My mentor keeps saying I need to go get lines of credit off the equity in them, but I still haven't.
Interesting. Okay. And what about, do you borrow money outside of that for other projects at all?
Not really from banks. I have some private lenders who I borrow money from.
Gotcha. I'd be curious to see if you could use these on balance sheets. I mean, there is an equitable asset, I would assume.
Yeah,
my weakest link.
I do have a couple banks who I have bought houses from, who I've used for lending in the past, and I did have it on the financial statement.
Nice. Okay.
So on both ends, the acquisition side and the dispo.
Very cool. Okay. Neat. And nice. Grace had 2 dead cats and bags of poop.
I had a lot of flea houses. Bought one with bed bugs.
Nice.
But nothing like crazy left behind.
We had a horror story. This was going back to when we were in Indiana. Gentleman, it was a rental. Gentleman died in a car accident. We didn't know until rent time when the neighbors next door called us to say the house really stunk. I'm like, oh, okay, well, rent hasn't been collected. We'll go knock on the door. Look in the window, and there's 2 dogs that were left in the house. His wife never checked them. So it had been 20-some days in the house. It just, you can't get that smell out. Let me put it that way. That smell never comes out. That was our worst horror story.
The dogs were still alive, though, right?
They were not.
Oh, God.
No, Sam. Sorry to burst the furry bubble there, but they were not. Yeah. And then Jess mentioned that Bob has found live kittens. Yep, kittens. We've had dogs. So we've adopted both dogs and cats out of flip houses. And Douglas is one of the cats that we pulled out of a house. He's our human resource manager in the office. So.
Oh, wow. Kept them around.
Yeah, he works on catnip and food. So, perfect. Any other questions from the group, guys? We've got Luke on the line. Let's pick his brain.
Luke, do you prefer the sub 2 over wholesaling? Like, have you done much wholesaling in the past, or tell me about that?
Yeah, so I would say my breakout year was about, I want to say 3 years ago. And I had just gotten into pay-per-click, right? I'd been kind of doing a little bit of everything. And I did, I think, I don't remember, 30 to 40 deals that year. About 70% of those deals were like wholesale type deals. I thought it was super cool, right? My mentor was like, okay, I want you to write down how much money you actually left on the table doing that. And it was like $400,000. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to wholesale anymore.
We're done with that. Got it.
But I guess all that to say is if wholesaling has its place, right? I still do it. I wholesaled a house a couple weeks ago. But as a model, I think you're just giving up way too much.
That makes sense. Well, I got a baby coming. Dave asked, how are you treating sub 2s when it comes to tax time?
I just let my accountant do it. I think it's all done in that form 6252.
Okay. So it's just, do you get the interest, or does that go to the original seller?
You get the interest. And I think that's, I spoke on this earlier, but I think that person was talking about something else. So I get the write-off, and then I 1098 my buyer too, so.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then for marketing, you mentioned pay-per-click. Are you doing any direct mail, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter. I've started doing some texting.
Okay.
That's going okay. I mean, you get a lot of people angry, but there are deals in there. But it doesn't matter. I mean, just your normal marketing methods will work.
Sure. So same acquisition funnel as any other. It's really, what I'm hearing, guys, is this is really a tool belt item. This isn't, it can be a standalone if that's what you want, but it's really a tool belt item, not a.
Right. Yeah, it's like you go to an appointment. My method is I have it pretty refined. I always want to take over that debt. I always want to get the subject to and give them as little money possible, just like everybody. But if it still makes sense, to give them cash and then go and raise it or figure it out, I mean, I'll do that too. So
10-4. That makes sense, brother. And then Jose asked, in the case where the seller wanted to buy back the mortgage from you and you didn't want to pay your price, is there something they can do to cause problems? And did they?
I mean, other than calling the bank and telling them, what happened, I suppose that's about it. And if somebody did that, I would probably have Chuck send them like a cease and desist. I don't know if it would stand up. I mean, it's
okay. So the worst they can do really is call it in your. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that house now has so much equity that, I mean, I'll figure it out.
Fair enough. Yeah, you can always refinance and get everything taken care of.
Yeah.
Let's say. Interesting. And again, you mentioned that most of the inherited debt that you're getting is under 5 1/4, so you're in the 3s and 4s.
Yeah.
So refinancing even to a business loan, you're not talking a huge spread difference if you had to go commercial lended route.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, this has been great, Luke. I really appreciate it, brother. I think the group had a lot of questions, and I think they got a lot out of it. So I know I learned quite a bit. So thank you for your time and your wisdom on this stuff. And again, the best way to reach out to you, Luke, is via Facebook Messenger, correct?
Yep. Just message me. If we're not friends on Facebook, just friend request me, and I'm an open book. I have an abundance mindset. I'll tell you everything about everything there is to know, that I know. So I'm ready to give out information.
Nice. Last question for you. What is the one thing that you would do differently starting out in sub?
Go all in early.
Perfect. Right on, brother. Go all in with sub 2?
Anything.
in general? Just
I mean,
jump off feet.
just me personally, just my business, like taking the real estate business seriously, putting all my eggs into the marketing basket, doing that sooner than later. I'm subjective to the shiny objects, so you know, I have the friends who are doing the 20 deal a month wholesale operations, and they're also, you know, they're all over Facebook, and so I'll be like, I'll hop on Facebook and look at my phone and be like, damn, maybe I should do 20 deals a month, right? And so like just clarify your vision and really just go all in on that.
Yeah, it's great knowledge, brother. Thank you again for that. Couple quick things. So next month we don't have a topic yet, guys. So if you have something that you'd like to propose, please throw it out there. We'll find someone to fill that niche. I think we've got quite a few available speakers at this point, both within the group and through the masterminds that we're linked up with. So if you guys have anything that you want to throw out there as a topic, please do that. We'd look super forward to that. Book club is firing back up here shortly. So I think we're doing the subtle art of not giving a fuck. So check that out. If you're interested in that and you don't mind the words, because I'm not afraid to use them, make sure you jump in the book club and join us for that. There's a lot of fucks given in first chapter, guys. Just FYI. So that'll be out there for you. And then last but not least, we are going to be adding a investor intern role to the company. So if that interests you, there'll be more information coming out next week on that. But if you want to hang out and see what we do day to day, much like Luke, we're very open book, and we'll share abundantly with you as we go through that. So hopefully this was useful, everyone. And we look forward to next month. Thanks, guys.